AI to the Sky, the podcast for those who build the future, not those who fear it. AI, automation, disruption, no mercy. Hosted by Joseph Fail.
This episode is powered by Rocket AI.
So, Stuart, let's kick things off with a quick icebreaker. What's your go-to TV show or your podcast these days? Something that you will never skip?
Joseph, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for that question. Look, I'm a great believer in breakfast. I don't skip breakfast. I know my son is not very keen on eating breakfast. My father was never keen on eating breakfast. I can't start the day or any podcast without having first had something to eat. And I like nowadays to start my day with eggs. So that's my thing. I won't skip. And I bet that wasn't the exact answer you were expecting to that question, was it?
No, definitely not, but it's beautiful. Thank you so much for that, Stuart. So, for most business leaders that tell me they want to scale, but when I ask them how they will handle 10x the operations without 10x the cost, they go really silent. Stuart, you've spent 30 years solving exactly these problems, from Oxford Virology labs to scaling businesses globally. Here's my first question. What's the biggest lie consultants tell the companies about scaling with AI?
They tell them that it's going to be easy, Joseph. They too often say it's the answer to your questions. Now, as you said, I started my career after working with viruses, human viruses, persistent human viruses many years ago. And the thing I started with was because I realized how difficult it was to get an accurate report on a patient's result from the hospital pathology lab out into the hospital, and to do it without increasing cost by making more people have to do that. I looked at making things more automated. And the key thing that I realized, which was going to be really critical to solve to making that automation work, was to get the right data to the right person with the right ability to interpret it. The key to scaling nowadays is no different than it was then. You have to have that data accessible. You have to have that data in the right format so that somebody can use it to automate a process. I used to say to people, automation is about getting the right information to the right person at the right time. It's nothing more than that. AI today is very little different. AI today relies on you getting the right information out of your AI system. You can feed it data, and if you feed it the wrong data, it produces the wrong result, and you get the wrong decision based upon that. You have to make sure that the data going in is correct. You have to make sure the data going in is in the format that can be used, and you have to make sure that that data is going to be interpreted in the right way. We've come a long way in the last 20 years with things like AI and automation, but the problems remain the same. Too many organizations have got data, but it's in unstructured formats, it's in inaccessible formats, and therefore, as a result, you cannot use it in order to make decisions. And I find again and again and again, most businesses start with somebody who knows what they want to achieve, and then they ring a friend and say, can you get me a computer and put it on my desk? And the computer arrives, and then they start putting things into the computer and they go, I've got a system. But that system doesn't have data in any way which is accessible to anybody else in their team as they grow, because it's been built in the wrong way. So I have to go back to organizations and say, yes, what you're asking to do is very easy. You're asking for something which is going to be implemented. But the first question we have to ask is, where is all the information that we need in order to feed into this system? And very often it's spread across a Word document, emails, it's in a database, it's in two databases, it's in another database over here, and 14,000 Excel spreadsheets. And as a result, it's all very difficult to manage. And so that's the key for me, is consultants come in and go, yes, we can do this, don't worry. But actually, you do have to start with sorting the data, getting it clean, getting everybody to agree on what we understand by the data, and then you can put it into your AI and automation systems.
So, for our audience who may not know you yet, Stuart Webb holds a DPhil in virology from Oxford, transitioned from medical research to leading digital transformation involving AI, RPA, and big data.
He's also the creator and co host of the Sustaining Success podcast, part of the Sustainability Workup program. But here's what caught my attention. You've developed something called PATH methodology, PATH, that stands for Purpose, Action, Team, and Harmony. And you explicitly state that scaling is not possible by using AI based automation to make it faster and more cost effective, right?
And you're absolutely right. The PATH methodology is based upon 4 pillars that I found I needed in order to be able to scale the businesses that I was involved with. You have to understand the purpose, who it is you serve, and why you serve them. That's the key thing. So many businesses don't have a very good focus on how they serve their customer and how that customer values the solution they bring to their problems. And then you need to translate that into action. That's what the A stands for, action. That's not only generating new leads and generating new customers from those leads, but it's delivering those results that customers need from you, whether that's a product, whether that's a service. Whatever you deliver to them has to be delivered exceptionally. It has to be delivered at the right time. And this is where I believe that our automation and our AI becomes so important. It is the ability to deliver, as I said, the right thing at the right time to the right person that leads to customers being delighted. If you send them something which doesn't get there in the right time, they're dissatisfied. If you get it to them too early, they can be dissatisfied. If you give them the wrong thing, they will be dissatisfied. It's getting the right thing to them at the right time when they expect it and when they need it, which leads to delighted customers. So a lot of what we do within PATH is ensure that the delivery is excellent. It produces the happy customer, the delighted customer, because it delivers the right thing at the right time. And instead of delivering what they asked for, it delivers what they need. Because so many customers ask for one thing, but what they're trying to say is, I want you to solve a problem. And they don't really understand their problem. So we help you to understand what the problem is and deliver the solution. And we do that with engaged, productive teams. And obviously the key to scaling is to use automation and AI in such a way that you don't grow your team beyond its potential, beyond its required capacity. You grow at the right speed. You don't put people in to patch over problems that have occurred in your delivery. It's producing the right team with the right motivations aligned with your purpose. And that leads to harmony, which is the final H.
Here's what we are unpacking in the 30 next minutes. First, we are diving into real cases where automation made the difference between companies staying stuck at 5 million revenue versus scaling to 50 million with a specific metrics, not theory. Second, Stuart is going to walk us through his framework for deciding when to use AI versus traditional automation, because let's be honest, not every problem needs a large language model. And third, we're tackling the intersection that nobody talks about, AI plus sustainability. How do you scale fast and responsibly? Stuart, before we go deep, I need to ask, what made a virologist from Oxford decide that business scaling was worth solving? Because that's quite a pivot.
Yes, you're right. It is something of a path, Joseph. The thing that I recognized when I was doing my research is that I was so interested in solving the real world problems I saw around me. There were many problems that I was enjoying solving, and I still enjoy around my science background. I still spend a lot of time working with businesses in the biotechnology field and the field where they're coming out of universities and helping them to scale. But I also recognize that I wanted ways of applying the knowledge and things that I was learning to real world problems. And so, as I said, my first business grew out of the fact that I wanted to transform the way in which we were delivering results from the pathology laboratory, which was situated next to my research lab, to the hospital. And as soon as I got the buzz from seeing how that transformed lives of clinicians, lives of patients, I just knew that I had to continue following that path.
So let's build from the ground up. For someone who's never implemented AI in their business operations, maybe they are still using, I don't know, maybe Excel for manual processes. Where do you even start?
So, as I said, what we start with is trying to understand what you're trying to achieve. I've been involved with a business just recently who said, we think we need to implement AI. How can you help us? What I started with was, well, okay, where are the bottlenecks? What are the things that are stopping you from growing at the moment? Where are the things that you're trying to do? Now, it started with a very simple problem. They had too many inquiries coming into their service agents, and they were unable to answer all of the questions. This was leading, as I said to you before, to dissatisfied customers. Customers wanted to ask questions about the product. They were trying something and it didn't work. They needed somebody to guide them through ensuring that they had the setup of their product correct. And the agents were spending sometimes an hour, and there were long waits on the phone for people to be able to get hold of them, to talk to them. So what we did is we went in and we implemented what we call a virtual service agent. The virtual service agent was an AI bot on a website, which was able to do a lot of the first line path of answering customer queries. Very simple. We took the database, which was the complete knowledge of all of the service agents who had been working, and we fed that into a model. And when a customer came and asked a question of the virtual service agent, who we called Amy for, I can't remember the reason now, but she became known as Amy. So when a customer came onto the website and asked Amy a question, they were able to pull from all of the knowledge of all of the service agents and provide some initial guidance. Now that was sufficient for many of the customers because they would get a very simple answer. It would point them towards a letter. It would point them towards an article on the website. They just didn't know how to find it. So that actually started to show that the queue times to the human agents reduced very rapidly. And it was a very quick system to put in. It only took us a few weeks. We built the system based on the current knowledge base. But once we started to understand what the knowledge base was showing to customers, we were able to extend it and put extra data behind that so that as soon as a customer came onto the website and asked a more detailed question, it actually cut down the second layer where they were going to go through and say, yeah, I've read that document. I don't need that one. I need a more specific answer to my question. And having managed to put that data in, we were able to filter out 68% of all of the queries that were currently being handled by in-person calls. That meant that when the customer came onto the website and said, that's not quite answered my question, I need a very specific discussion about a very specific thing, we were able to immediately hand that off to a service agent who initially engaged with a chat, and then if needed could implement or could start a voice call with the customer and then immediately resolve their issue. So wait times came down from over 60 minutes. We had a 63-minute average wait. They came down initially to just a few minutes because the agent was being dealt with, to when they did need to have a call with an actual agent, the wait time was less than 12. And so that reduction from 63 to 12 was key to moving that business through to scale. Suddenly customers were happy. The net promoter score went up significantly. And not only did the net promoter score went up, but they started to see revenue go up because customers would come back and repeat buy, and they did start to see some referrals. And that actually was the key to them starting to scale. They went from something like 8 million and they went up to over 16 million within a 12-month window.
So, Stuart, you work with both multinational and SMEs, right? So here's the tension I want to address. Multinationals have resources, but move kind of slow. SMEs move fast, but lack of resources.
Yeah.
When it comes to AI-based automation for scaling, who actually has the advantage, and maybe why?
So two things for that, Joseph. You're right that many multinationals have large resource pools that you can pull upon. They also have a lot of data, and that data is often very, very useful. The problem with many multinationals is that data is often very is extensive, but is in a format which is not helpful to you when you start your journey towards AI and automation, because it is dispersed, it is somewhat unstructured. But you can get good resources in order to resolve that. What I have found that sometimes has hampered an AI automation implementation within a large multinational is some of the guardrails that the risk analysis department will put around what you can do. They fear that you could get decisions made which will not help them. So there are a lot of tests, a lot of discussions, a lot of trying to understand where people's fears are, which you then use in order to try and help them to understand what the AI can do, how it will help, where we will take it. We spend a lot of time in discussion. We spend a lot of time in training. We spend a lot of time in training the people within the organization on what they need to think about in terms of to understand how this implementation can help them. Now that's time. That's quite expensive, but it does mean that when you've done that, when you've had those discussions, when people are comfortable about what this will do, how it will help them, the amount of data that they've got once you've cleaned it and made it accessible is hugely valuable. And it does mean that they can then make great use of some of the AI technology that exists. I'm working with an organization at the moment where we're actually putting in a predictive risk intelligence system that's monitoring for where machinery and processes might break. And that's hugely valuable. The risk department was very, very uncomfortable about this because it meant exposing some of their potentially very, very sensitive and proprietary data to a system which they didn't understand, and they were very concerned that that could be hacked. So we had to do an awful lot of showing to them about the safety and security around that data to ensure that they understood that that data was securely held and was going to be accessible only to the appropriately authorized systems. However, having got that much data from them, that model is now proving to be very, very effective. With an SME, the problem is that they are prepared to take those risks. They just don't necessarily have the data that you need in order to be able to do something like a predictive risk model, because they just don't have the data to do it. And for many smaller SMEs where we're working with a similar sort of, we'd like to put one of these similar risk mitigation systems in place, they haven't got the historical data. They don't have the forecasting data in order to be able to use it effectively. They're much more happy to take a risk. They want to try different ideas. They're very comfortable with some of that. Often they're led by a very innovative and highly challenging team who are prepared to move quick and want to try and take a few risks. But the data is not there to help support that. So it takes a much longer to try and model the data and find ways of adding in supplementary data, which is possibly not ideal, but will help to start to build the picture so that we can take the steps forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure, because both of them takes time.
Yes.
With too much data and without data, right? You didn't just wake up one day and invent facts. There had to be a specific moment, maybe a client failure or maybe a breakthrough that crystallized this approach.
Yes.
What was that moment for you?
So I started my first business shortly after I decided to leave my academic career, and I was aware that I needed to adopt a slightly more entrepreneurial mind than perhaps I had had when I was working within a very scholastic academic environment. So I started the business, and of course, I was largely at the center of the business because this was my idea and what have you. And I grew a small team, and I discovered that I was working 20 hours a day because there was so much to do. I was young, I could do it, but I couldn't help but think I thought that these people were going to be more helpful to me. They seem to be coming in, but they come in much later than me. They go much earlier than me, and I don't see what they've done since they got here. So that business, I got out of that business. It was okay, but I then started another business, and I realized again that I was very, very busy, and I didn't see how the business was going to continue to grow at the pace that it started. And it was somebody who sat down with me and said, "How are you feeling?" And I said, "I'm frustrated. I'm extremely, I'm feeling skeptical. I'm feeling stuck. I feel tired, and I feel like I'm wasting time and money, and I don't know where I'm coming from." And they asked the question to me, "The last person you hired, what is it they are doing for you?" And I said, "I'm not sure." It was absolutely true. I said, "I'm not sure." And they said, "I think we found your problem. You don't have a clear line between the purpose of your business and what your team is doing. And that is leading to them being stuck to know how they should be acting and what systems in place are actually supporting all of that." And I looked at them, this person who I had known for not too long, and I thought, it was the wisest words they had ever spoken to me. It was absolutely true. So I changed that. I decided that we would relink our actions, our lead generation, our customer conversion, our delivery back to our purpose. We had a purpose within the business. We knew who we served. We knew what we wanted to do to make that customer's life better so that their problems were solved. We made it very clear. I emphasized again and again, this is why we come to work each day. Suddenly those actions became easier because people were aligned. And it was at that point that I thought, now the people around me understand what their jobs are, I can delegate much more of what I'm doing to them. And I then learned how to properly delegate to people, in that I knew that I knew I had to have a process. And it was during this, Joseph, that I actually relinked my scientific thinking back into my business life, if that makes sense to you. I realized that after several years of having left science, that actually as a scientist, I had a process. When I was doing an experiment, I had a clear idea of why it was that I was doing the experiment. I designed an experiment. I didn't change everything. I changed one thing at a time to move the experiment on. I took the results, the data from my experiment, I interpreted it, and then I took that back to okay, what's my next experiment? What variable do I want to change in order to move the experiment to the next stage? And it suddenly dawned on me, that's how I needed to grow a business. Because until then, I had been doing this, throw everything against the wall and see what sticks, try everything and see and hope. And suddenly I became very aware that the scientific approach that I had adopted as a scientist worked for a business as well. So having got the purpose and started linking people's jobs to the purpose, the actions we take became very scientific. Any experiment I ran within the marketing, within the delivery, within the customer conversion, within the science, between the delivery of the service, we did experiment. Every time we did it, I would say, write down on a one-page piece of paper, what is it we're trying to do? What is it we want to change? How are we going to measure it? Change one thing, measure the result, and if that works, we'll go back to the beginning and we'll try to improve it again. And suddenly we had a series of experiments happening using the scientific principles I understood, and the data was coming out, and I was able to interpret the data and say that experiment works, we'll do more of that. That experiment doesn't, we will do less of that. And we started to have sudden and rapid growth because we knew how to interpret the data. We knew how to apply the scientific principles in order to grow. That became something which then people, and this comes back to the team was happy, and we had harmony. We had people who could say, I understand what I'm doing here. We have a process. We understand how we link that to our purpose. And I had investors who went, oh, this all seems to be working now. And so therefore, I came up with, let's put this into a 4-pillar system: the purpose, the action, team, and harmony. And that became a business which grew, and I was much, much more productive in it.
Oh, wow. That was really insightful, Stuart.
It took a while, Joseph. It didn't happen overnight. You asked me what happened overnight. It didn't happen overnight. It took many months, but it suddenly became very clear that applying such scientific principles to a daily business actually works. And so I just took out of the sort of the tool bag that I put on one side all that scientific thinking, and I just said, right, we're going to do this like scientists. Even those people in marketing that have never been taught in science, even those people in the service agency that have never been taught science, I'm going to teach you. And actually I did. I stood up on one occasion. I went, I'm going to give you a lecture about how a scientist does an experiment. And just listen for a bit and then ask me questions. And everybody went, oh, that makes sense. I never understood science at school. Now I kind of get it because of the way you explained it.
Stuart, we are in a peak AI hype right now in 2025.
Yeah.
Everyone's throwing AI into their pitch decks. Now you've been in tech long enough to see hype cycles. Yeah. What's one AI trend right now that you think it's overhyped, and what's one that it's underhyped?
So I think one that is heavily overhyped at the moment is video. I think the use of AI to produce videos is something that everybody thinks is going to be very useful. I'm less convinced. However, using AI, as I said, to do things like predictive risk management or to do large-scale quantitative analysis is underserved. I would like to see many more organizations using it for predictive risk intelligence.
Fantastic. Thank you for bringing real frameworks and honest insights in this conversation, dear Stuart. I think what resonates most is your point about AI not being magic, right? It's a tool that requires strategic thinking, which is exactly what you bring from your scientific background. For everyone listening, if this conversation added value, do 3 things, please. Share this episode with one person who's struggling with scaling, leave a review wherever you are listening, and follow AI to the Sky on LinkedIn and YouTube for more conversations like this.
Sure. And Joseph, can I just say thank you so much for using the word linking your AI solution to strategy. If there were more people like you saying that, we would have much greater AI adoption at the moment, automation adoption, because it does need to be linked to a strategy. It's not something you just go into. You have to think about, how is this thing going to help my business? So thank you so much for emphasizing that. Thank you for having me on. You can find me if you go to LinkedIn. So linkedin.com/in/Stuart Webb. That's StuartWebb. That's me on LinkedIn. Find me there, connect with me. I'd be more than happy to answer any questions anybody has.